Hello, before we start today's episode, I wanted to let you know that I am doing a theatre show in Edinburgh on the 17th, 18th and 19th of December. The show is called Unquiet Objects and is 3 adaptations of classic M.R. James ghost stories in collaboration with Parrot Theatre Company. It is on at 7 p.m. in the Banshee Labyrinth on the 17th, 18th and 19th of December, and you can get your tickets at reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com.
If you're a smoker or vapor ready to make a change, you really only need one good reason. But with Zyn nicotine pouches, you'll discover many good reasons. Zyn is America's #1 nicotine pouch brand. Plus, Zyn offers a robust rewards program. There are lots of options when it comes to nicotine satisfaction, but there's only one Zyn. Check out zyn.com/find to find Zyn at a store near you. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hello and welcome to episode number 299 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And to kick things off this week, I would like to say thanks to some of our newest Patreon subscribers. I would like to thank Geraldine K. Anathan, Gigi, Jill Mork, Clara Gavahan, Tina M, Susan Sherrod, and Vicky Strange. Thank you so much for subscribing to the Patreon. I love you and appreciate you every single day. Which brings us to our film review, and our film review this week is Keeper. Keeper was released in 2025. It has 5.9 out of 10 on IMDb and 49% on Rotten Tomatoes. A romantic anniversary trip to a secluded cabin turns sinister when a dark presence reveals itself, forcing a couple to confront the property's haunting past. Before I get into this review, there are a few things more humbling than being in a cinema screen for a late night screening of a horror film completely alone, because that will show you who you really are. And the only thing that is probably more humbling than that is being in a cinema screen to watch a horror film alone late at night and somebody else comes in, so it's just you and them. That, I will say, will test your mettle. You know, and as somebody who likes to think that they're not easily scared and doesn't particularly find horror films, for the most part, scary, it was an interesting time for sure. So let's get into the likes for this film. So I actually really liked the setup for this, both in terms of the relationship between the two characters and in terms of physical location, right? So it's in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. And they've been together for a year. He is a doctor and she is an artist. There seems to be some sort of discrepancy financially between them, which seems to kind of cause some simmering tension. It's never really explicitly said, right? But it seems to kind of cause a bit of unsaid tension. And there's just this weird, unknowable, unsaid something in their relationship, and you don't quite know what it is, right? So the whole time it's you're not quite comfortable with each other in the way that you would expect a relationship of a year to be. It's like they're both holding back, or they both don't know each other quite as well as they should. Something is strange, something is off in their relationship. And I thought, without being explicit, I thought that was highlighted in a pretty adept way. And I thought the sound design was great in this film. There was a really good use of silence, but also a brilliant use of subtle sound to create the horror and the tension. There's this great moment, for example, where she's in the bath and she's having a lovely time in the bath, and she realizes that she can hear her partner humming through the vents, like the sound is carrying through the ventilation system, and she's sort of nicely listening to him in the bath. And then you realize as the audience, and I was really straining to listen, that under his humming you just hear the really faint sound of a woman humming along with him. And it was just so cleverly done, because I was sitting going, am I hearing a woman? Like who am I hearing with him? I also thought that visually it was quite nice. You know, they're in this kind of cabin in the woods. You are inside the cabin for the majority of the film, and the bits we see of the outside, you can get that sense of isolation. And there's this idea of being like at one with nature, but everything not being quite what it seemed. And yeah, you know, visually I thought it was quite cool. I really thought the protagonist did a great job. She is an interesting character. Like I said, she's an artist, and you can sense in her that she's not quite sure about the relationship, and she does well with what I would argue is a really limited script. And I guess her partner, he was good too. He was sort of like sweet and bumbling in a way, and kind of found it difficult to, like, at times he just couldn't get a sentence out in a succinct manner. And, you know, I thought they were kind of relatively good characters, right? And the thing that I think I liked most about this film was the entities that are in this film were genuinely some of the most scary horror creatures that I've seen in a long time. There were times where you saw something and I went, oh no, that's awful. No, I don't want to see that. Now, this brings me to my dislikes. And the first thing I wrote in my dislikes column was a lot, actually. I really, really fundamentally disliked this film. Some of the entities were so scary, like I said. There were some monsters, entities, creatures, whatever, that really like made me catch my breath. But some of them were just so badly done. There was a moment with an entity in the house, and it was all hair and sort of spindly and but also was like so clearly CGI. Not that there's, like, you know, lots of horror films use CGI, but this was like, oh, this is like CGI, you know. And then there was another moment where this entity is crawling foot over hand down the stairs towards the protagonist, which was very scary, right? And I was thinking, oh my God, when that entity gets to her, I don't know what's going to happen. But then it took 1,000 years for the entity to actually get to her, even though it was going foot over hand down a normal sized staircase. But because they had timed the beginning of the descent really badly, the entity seemed to take an inordinate amount of time to get down the stairs, and then it was all I could focus on. I was like, wow, is that thing ever going to get down the stairs? It's taken a comically long time over getting down the stairs. And this film has confirmed to me that I do not care for Osgood Perkins. So Osgood Perkins directed this film. He didn't write it, but he did direct it. And there is just simply too much focus on weird and edgy imagery and not enough focus on decent storytelling. I can't fault him for that, right? Because, like I said, he didn't write it, but it was badly written. The film was literally chock full of like loose threads of metaphors and ideas and through lines, and none of them seemed to link into a solid story. So there was like constant fish imagery and metaphors that just weren't well thought out. I was like, what am I trying to hold on to here with this constant reference to fish? There was a cake that popped up throughout, and I couldn't figure out the significance of it. There were heads being dipped in honey, which I'm sure was all very deep and meaningful, but because there were all of these metaphors that didn't kind of tie into anything at the end, the story itself became really convoluted, and I just didn't get it. And I don't mind ambiguity in horror films at all. I think that it is a really powerful thing not to spoon feed your audience. But this film was somehow both ambiguous and completely overloaded with poorly thought out metaphors. It was like the ambiguity was used to try and replace good storytelling rather than to enhance good storytelling. And I think a part of it was to do with pacing. It was slow and bitty. And again, I don't mind a slow horror film. But then the last 15 minutes, we had like heavy and confusing exposition, which I thought was very similar to Longlegs, which is also an Osgood Perkins film. I wasn't a fan of Longlegs. I thought it was fine. But I thought the last 15 minutes was completely incoherent with the rest of the film and overloaded with heavy exposition that wasn't mapped out properly, and then it became confusing. And while I liked the visuals of this film, like I liked where it was set, I liked that we got these gorgeous views of the woods and the cabin, etc., I felt like there was also this desperate attempt for it to look edgy, where it was like, we're going to film these scenes at odd angles and we're going to have cutaways regularly throughout the film to fish at varying states of being. And I just got to the point where I was like, if I see another fish, I am going to dip my own head in honey, because I cannot be arsed with this anymore. And I also, I'm ranting now, but listen, who cares? I have a real problem with a confusing exposition that ends in a sort of pseudo-feminist something. I don't really know what the end of the film was trying to say or portray, but there was sort of a sense of, you know, we are the voices of all the women who have come before. And I was like, before what? I can't even follow this story. So what am I supposed to be holding on to? And I love a nice feminist nod in a horror film, but this just didn't do it for me. I just thought, you know what, I don't know what's happening, and I frankly don't care. And you know what the most frustrating thing was for me is that I actually thought this film could have been brilliant. I thought the setup was really good. I thought the story was actually genuinely a really good story. I mean, what I could understand of it. I think that if they had stripped away all of the metaphors and all of the symbolism and actually focused on telling a decent story, this would have been really interesting, and it could have like retained all of the scary monsters and entities and all that jazz and been a really good film. Instead, they focused on trying to make it look arty and trying to make it too cerebral, and it felt pretentious, and I was not a fan, and that is 2 stars for Keeper.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. Enjoy personalized comfort for better sleep night after night. It's the final days of our Black Friday sale. Recharge this season with a bundle of cozy, soothing comfort. Now only $17.99 for our C2 mattress and base, plus free premium delivery. Prices higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Check it out at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com today.
You know you've reached peak couple energy when your undies match. MeUndies Match Me has you both covered, literally, in super soft ultramodal undies, socks, PJs, and loungewear. Festive prints? Check. Cozy vibes? Double check. And right now, it's deal season. Get up to 50% off site-wide for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Take your couple game to the next level with MeUndies Match Me. To get deals up to 50% off, go to MeUndies.com/ACAST. Enter promo code ACAST. That's MeUndies.com/ACAST. Code ACAST.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to entertain my kids without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids started using it right away and haven't stopped since. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more at no screens or ads. Now through December 1st, Yoto is having its biggest sale of the year. Check out yotoplay.com.
And I am joined in the virtual studio by the wonderful, the very hydrated, the looking very trim, Tim Cloke.
Hello, Emma. You did that because I just took a big swig of water, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I forget every time that I need 3 new adjectives, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm panicking.
So we went with hydrated this time. I'll certainly take that.
I mean, do you feel hydrated? Was it a lie?
No, I don't feel at all hydrated. I've been to the gym tonight, and if anything, I'm feeling absolutely parched. I'm probably going to need to pause at some point and go and get some more water.
Oh, shit. Okay, well, listen, I tried, okay? I tried. The other two weren't lies, though. Wonderful and looking very trim. So
No.
there you go.
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. It is true that this is probably our latest ever recording, isn't it?
Yes. What time is it? Oh my God, it's 20:09 at night. This is late going. And I would like to say, and I say this every time, but I want to reiterate it, okay? A lot of work goes into these episodes, not by me, a lot of work by Tim. So this episode was written in the summer. It involves some serious tongue twisters, first
it really
of all.
Does.
And then you've just done a long day at work. You've been to the gym and you are now recording this. And I appreciate it so much because it is not an easy task and the listeners appreciate it and everyone loves you.
Well, that's really kind again to say, but we've sort of realised that if we don't do it tonight, then we just don't know when it's going to happen. And given that it's been since August since we last recorded, then we can't really wait too much longer with this. Otherwise, I really will have forgotten everything. Because this has actually taken a little bit more rehearsal on my part than some of my previous episodes, simply because I'm not going to be doing all of this, in my native language. It's all going to be in English. It is all going to be in English, but not necessarily my English.
Oh, this is very exciting.
Would you like me to tell you now what the title of this episode is?
Yes, I would.
I've simply called this episode Ilfa Yashot.
Because of course, yes. And I'm sure people, when they looked at the title of this episode, were like, what? So tell us, what does that mean?
It simply means elf shot.
Wow, okay. Well, and you can hear the sound in there. So that's really interesting.
It's one of the things I truly believe about listening to this language is the more you listen to it, the more you just sort of get clued into it and tuned into it, really. And you start to automatically pick out certain words which are incredibly close in both sound and intonation to modern English words, because Elfyashot is just the old English for elf shot, which is a particular phenomenon which has got linguistic reminders in our modern language. But actually hints at some of the beliefs of people who lived on these islands over 1,000 years ago. And pulling that apart and trying to get to know those people from across the ages is something that really excites me.
Okay, let's do this, Tim. I'm excited.
What I would first say is I am not an expert in Old English, far from it. I'm sort of fascinated by linguistics without being that versed in it. I've got a history degree rather than a linguistics degree. I didn't take English language any further than A-level. But I'm fascinated by etymology and the origins of sayings and the origins of ideas. And as a result, I do try to occasionally to read Old English. Now, in a previous episode last year, it was about October last year, wasn't it? I read a very short section of an Anglo-Saxon poem called The Wanderer. And people seem to really like it. And we did have some requests, didn't we, for me to do a bit more in Old English. And I have prepared some of that tonight. But what you need to understand if you're trying to read the original Old English text is that the letters don't have the same phonetics as modern letters, and it's not consistent either. So sometimes a G will have a hard sound, sometimes it will sound like a Y. C's will sometimes have a hard sound, and sometimes they'll come out like a CH. It is complete mental gymnastics. And after a day at work and a day communicating with children, I am going to make this as clear as possible. But where I make mistakes, and I will make mistakes, I'm just asking for you to be sympathetic towards that, and I'm going to certainly do my best. But what I'd really like to do is I'd like to read the Old English of some of these texts first, and then the translations where we can pull them apart. And I would invite you to simply enjoy the poetry and language of it for what it is, but also to try and tune your ear in and listen for any of those words which you may well recognize. And I'm not here to tell you how you should listen to a podcast, but you might quite enjoy, once you've heard the translation, going back and listening to the Old English original again. But this is all going to be about Anglo-Saxon, so we're talking early British medieval, that's what we mean by Anglo-Saxon, beliefs about elves, fairies, and more.
My absolute favourite. Let's do this.
The first poem is simply called With Fire Stitcher, which means against stabbing pains. Wish me luck. Hluda hueran, hila hluda, the hir over thon hlua ridan. Weren an moda, daar hier over land bieden. Schil du die nu du visna nith janassen mutter. Ut, little spear, jef hier in a sea. Stud onder linde onder lertumschilde. There the mitraien wif hira mean berothon. Und hier jelende jada senden. Ich him othern eft willa senden. Fleoyende, flena forena, toyanas. Ut, little spear, jef hit here in a sea. Sat smith sloch seas. Little ezerna wound swither. Ut, little spear, jef here in a sea. Six smithers, satten, whalesperda rotten. Ut, little nas in sperda. Jef here in a sea ezernas dal. Hagtessan, your work. Hit shall ye milton. Jef thur wera on fellshotten. Offer were on flesh-shotten, offer were on blood-shotten, offer were on leaf-shotten, nefra nethis din lif je attest. Jef hit were essa je shot, other hit were elfe je shot, other hit were hagtessen je shot. Nu, each willa then helpan. This there to bota essa je shottes, this there to bota elfe jeshottes. This there to bota hagtessen jeshottes. Ich din willa helpan. Fleur there on fear hafte. Hal westu helpa din dritten. Nim dhona that seax adu on wetan. Can't quite believe I did that in one take, Emma.
Sorry, I am in shock. I forgot to unmute my mic. I can't believe you, like, genuinely, hand on heart, that was one take, listeners. One single take.
Thank you very much. I can hear the applause.
We can end the podcast now, actually, because it's not going to get any better than that.
Look up your own translations of that, I think.
Yeah, who cares?
Did you pick up any parts of that?
So there were words that I could kind of pick out. There's things like elf-shotten that I could hear, and little spear I could hear quite regularly.
Oops, little spear, that came up quite a bit, didn't it?
Is that out, little spear?
It is out, little spear, because remember, we're describing something that is a charm against stabbing pains.
Yes, so out, little spear, and it was saying out. Was it out into the sea, out into somewhere? Out?
No, not in that case. It's more sea from the point of view of it's here. The grammar's a bit
like
weird.
C as in, yeah, right, gotcha. I'm trying to think, what was there a wife in there somewhere? Because weef, I heard.
Yes, there is. So there's a reference to a woman making something.
Oh, see, I feel like when you get your ear in, it does get easier. I could pick out now. I should have written down all the words that I could pick out and be like, oh, I know what that is.
So hagtessen as well. Hagtessen. Any clues from that?
Tell me.
A hagtessen.
No, I don't know.
Referring to hags, what would we be referring to?
Like a hagstone? Like something along those lines?
Hagstones, which refer to witchcraft.
Okay, so is that hagtessen is witchcraft?
Hagtessen would be referring to a witch. So hagtessen yawuk would be the work of a witch.
The work of a witch. So okay.
So we could go through the translation and see what is in there, and if people wanted to go back and listen to it again, then they always could do. But I'm impressed. You've actually heard quite a few bits of it, which are handily quite repeated, but they're so close to the modern English. You go, oh yeah, this contextually does make some sense, and it's a pretty incredible thing, because this is not really. It's very much between being a supernatural charm and a practical remedy.
Okay, interesting.
There isn't really a distinction between the two. They are one and the same in the context of when this was written. So there are elements within this which are essentially prayers. From the Christian sense, there are elements of this which are pre-Christian. It refers to old gods, as you'll hear as well. There's an awful lot of folklore and superstition in it, but it sort of finishes, as you will hear, with a remedy which, while it wouldn't have done any actual good, it may have provided a little bit of relief from a practical sense, and it does finish with a genuine remedy that wouldn't be supernaturally based. It would be something that you could prepare and just put on. So this is actually from a book of remedies, not prayers. And we'll come on to the context of that in a moment. Shall we hit the translation now?
Yeah, I'm dying to hear it.
So this is from the Book of Remedies I've been talking about, which we'll come back to, and it's simply called Against Stabbing Pains. They were loud, yes, loud, when they rode over the burial mound. They were fierce when they rode across the land. Shield yourself now, you can survive this strife. Out, little spear, if there is one here within. It stood under limewood, under a light shield, where those mighty women marshalled their powers, and they sent shrieking spears. I will send another back, a flying arrow ahead in opposition. Out, little spear, if it is here within. A craftsman sat, forged a knife, small as swords go, violent the wound. Out, little spear, if it should be here within. 6 craftsmen sat, wrought slaughter spears. Be out, spear, not in, spear. If there is here within a piece of iron, the work of hags, it must melt. If you were shot in the skin, or were shot in the flesh, or were shot in the blood, or were shot in the limb, may your life never be harmed. If it was the shot of the old gods, or if it was the shot of elves, or it was the shot of hags, now I will help you. This for you as a remedy for the shot of the old gods. This for you as a remedy for the shot of elves. This for you as a remedy for the shot of hags. I will help you. Fly around there on the mountaintop. Be healthy. May the Lord help you. Then take the knife, wet it in the liquid. Now, this accompanied a recipe for making an ointment, which you would then place on a warmed knife, which would be put over the place where the pain was. The idea being that the ointment would provide some sort of relief. The warmth of the knife probably just felt quite nice on a painful area, but by placing a real earthly weapon over the invisible wound, the idea was that it would draw out the supernatural wound. So this is essentially, it's a remedy against unexplained pains that you cannot see on the skin.
Because this is what I was going to say to you. So obviously we're talking about what they're referring to as being elf shot, and I was like,
Yes.
okay, well, what does that translate to in real world speaking? Like, what do they mean by elf shot? So it's just a pain that you can't quantify, basically.
Well, we still use the word. You've been out for a run and had a stitch before, haven't you?
Yeah.
And this is called with fire stitch, against the stabbing pains like stitches.
Oh my God, is that why we call it a stitch?
That's where it comes from. It comes from the Old English word, yeah.
I never knew
the fire
that.
bit is burning or fire, and stitch is the stabbing pain.
You know, interestingly, so one of and I always bring this back to Irish folklore. I'm sorry, but I do know that when we were kids, there's a really famous series of books called Under the Hawthorn Tree.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 other books, like Fields of Home is one of them, and I don't remember the other one. And they're about 3 kids surviving the Great Hunger. And in it, they warm a knife in order to draw out the badness in a wound.
Yeah.
And that's just literally popped into my head while you were reading that. I was like, oh,
literally
yeah.
identical. There's no difference. This is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, how
this
interesting.
is an ancient idea which has come down the ages still, and people are still telling these stories.
That is just so fascinating. That is, like, I love it. And I love that mix of old gods, Christianity, prayer, and actual practical remedies, which is, you know, and you can imagine, say if it is a stitch or if it is like actually a muscular pain or whatever, and you put a warm compress on it, you put a warm anything on it, it will probably feel better.
Of course it will, yeah. And one of the things I like about this is that there's a certain amount of positivity here, because grammatically speaking, as long as I'm not about to be corrected by a linguist, there's a bit in it. It says "nu ich willa vin helpan," which, if I read it with slightly more modern English, "nu" is now, "ich willa" can mean I want to, or it can mean I will and I am. So that's slightly ambiguous, but it's very likely to mean the latter is I am going to do this. I'm going to give you that sort of faith that is needed from the bedside manner that this is going to help. Vin is thine or you. Helpan is, well, help. It's just it's the same word essentially with an extra syllable added on to the end for the grammar, because the grammar is ridiculously complex in many ways with Old English and quite unfamiliar. There's a lot more in common with, for example, modern German. And Yeah, it's a fascinating one. But I've got now, if you'll indulge me, the context behind where that has come from, where it survived, and what the possible meanings were for the beliefs of these people 1,000 years ago, and for how they interpreted the world around them from both a natural and a supernatural point of view. So shall we dive into it?
Yes, let's go.
The text that I have just read you is from an Old English text of common remedies for various ailments called the Lachnunga. It was called this by Victorian antiquarians anyway, who compiled it from various other surviving manuscripts. It is likely to have been written in the 10th century, about 1,100 years ago. By this time, about a century before the Norman conquest, England had been united under one king for about a century, following the reign of King Athelstan. It was, for the time, prosperous, well-governed, and crucially, Christian. However, many of the texts in the Lachnunga make only cursory reference to the Christian theology, but frequent reference to more ancient beliefs and superstitions. When peering back through the mists of time, it can be hard to discern which beliefs were considered religious and supernatural, and which were considered part of the natural world. And in truth, it is likely no such distinction existed at all. This time, now more usually called the early medieval period, was once known as the Dark Ages. Not because culture was somehow absent. The incredible illuminated manuscripts of this time show that culture on the British Isles flourished, but because so little of the historical record survives, and we are forced to interpret what we can from the fragments that remain. In this culture, well into the Christian period, and in places centuries later into the early modern period, ancient beliefs about invisible and often malign beings persisted. Elves were as real to people in the early medieval period as the deer and wolves that inhabited the forests. Yes, indeed, wolves remained numerous in England's forests at this time, as large as their modern Arctic equivalents and just as deadly. In the far north, there were even likely small populations of bears. If you went down to the woods those days, be sure of a big surprise. Anglo-Saxon elf lore, then, was neither supernatural nor religious to contemporary peoples. They also did not fit modern images of elves. Forget the elegance of Tolkien's elven societies, nor should we think of the little folk of Victorian fairy lore. The Saxon idea of the Alpha was one where generally male entities lived invisibly alongside rural communities, or inhabited the woodlands, guarding them jealously. While often characterized as small, even demonic, there is good evidence that unlike demons and monsters, the Alpha were considered to be people. Many names of Anglo-Saxon origins contain derivatives of Alpha. Alfred, meaning advised by the elves, and Alfward, or guardian of the elves, were both of England. Alfwyn, or Elf's Joy, was the Lady of Mercia. Such associations show that the relationship between people and the world of the Alpha was complex. With Firesticher, or against stabbing pain, we can see that these ideas are stated as medically understood belief. Most interpretations of the charm suggest that it is intended to cure the stabbing pains of rheumatism, but one cannot be certain of this. After all, the healers in the early medieval world would be unlikely to make distinctions about different types of unexpected pain. But consider this. What explanation could there be when an otherwise externally unharmed person suddenly complained of stabbing pains or collapsed in agony? Today, we might recognise this sudden loss of mobility, perhaps on one side only, and diagnose a stroke. But why a stroke? What has the person been struck by? In a time before any sort of neuroscience, such extreme and sudden symptoms may be blamed upon the sudden impact of an invisible weapon or projectile. The person might be elf-struck or elf-shot. In With Firestitch, this is described quite literally. The charm describes "Yith du wera on fel, flesh, blood, other livschotten." Literally, if you were on skin, flesh, blood, or limbs shot, caused by Esa, Alpha, other Hagtesen shot, or the shot of the old gods, elves, or hags and witches, then the healer will then help on this, or will, or can help this wound. The treatment itself, aside from the speaking of the charm and a prayer, involved the boiling of a potion of feverfew daisies, red dead nettles, plantain, and butter. Into this, as the charm instructs, should the healer that seix adu on wetan, that knife on the potion wet. The knife would then be placed against the source of the pain. Would this have helped? Well, certainly, it could have done no harm. The sensation of warm metal with sweet-smelling butter and herbs might have even been pleasant. The medicinal uses of plantain were well known at this time, being an antitoxic, antimicrobial, and antihistamine. The science behind this was not understood, even if the therapeutic effects were well known from long experience. However, such an antimicrobial would have been of greater use in treating open wounds. The stabbing pains addressed by Wythsfeierstich were against wounds that had no visible external effect. Such a potion was likely also to be used on visible external wounds. So what was the hoped effect of such a cure? Again, the text provides a possible clue. To the Ilfershot or elf shot was probably thought equivalent to being struck by a visible earthly arrow. The text says, Ut little spear, yif here in a sea, ut spear nas inspira, meaning out little spear, if it is here within, suggesting that the belief in a very real, if invisible, our world wound. Moreover, it seems that the charm was designed to physically remove the invisible weapon. Yif here in a se isenus dal hactasen yawok hitchalya milton, or if there is some iron here, the work of witches, it shall melt away. So we see that the charm involves the physical removal of an invisible weapon, as a remedy for the physical healing of an invisible wound. Then, why might these pains have been ascribed to the wounding by invisible little spears, wielded by or shot by the elves, gods or witches? Most obviously, probably the similarity in pain to visible wounds, but perhaps with an additional interpretation of the evidence around them. People in these islands and beyond have long discovered enigmatic stone objects, stone arrowheads beyond the skill of the Saxon people to craft in an age of iron-wrought tools that seem to speak of a more mysterious age. What we might call the Neolithic arrowheads and spear points were known to them as elf shot, perhaps the physical remnants of invisible weapons. Adding complexity to the belief in elves as invisible yet also physical entities was the cultural impact of the Norse world on England. While Alfred the Great secured an at least temporary peace between his kingdom of Wessex and the Norse king Guthrum, this came at a price. On the one hand, the Danes were given free rein in the north, in the region that became known as the Danelaw, and were paid off with a tribute of Danegeld, which laid the foundations of a new system of tax collection within the Saxon sphere of influence. The Danelaw became increasingly influenced by Norse culture. On the other hand, whether in his heart he believed it or not, Guthrum agreed to be baptised, much against the beliefs of many of his followers, and to leave Wessex and the southern England to the Christian Saxons. However, the borders of the Danelaw were porous, and cultural and material trade continued between these peoples. To this day, a millennium after Viking raids and settlement ended, place names and dialect in the north retain the imprint of Norse influence. Many modern English words are derived from Norse words, yet another reason why English is such a bewildering variety of words for the same thing. Those of you who enjoy this linguistic versatility might have cause to be joyful, happy, or full of glee. Alongside linguistic influences, Saxon elf lore was joined by the Norse belief in the Aesir, or old gods, the Dweho, or the dwarfs, and the magic of the Sethir, seeing into the future. Over time, such beliefs evolved and diversified, but again, such ancient distinctions can become unclear. Also contained within the Lachnunga is another 10th century charm, but one that appears to have originated even earlier than the charm against stabbing pains. This one is simply titled With Dweoch, or Against a Dwarf. Here, the word dwarf is misleading to modern ears, and in fact likely has more in common with the Saxon Alpha than the industrious friends of Snow White or Gandalf. Where in English the word has come to have many meanings related to smallness, here the Dweoch is another being that lives alongside the visible world, having a malign influence on it. With Dweoch may actually be a charm against an affliction that I, and perhaps many of you, have experienced. Perhaps from these readings, when we get to them, you will discern which terrifying experience it might have been intended to guard against.
Oh my God, can I guess?
Any thoughts? Oh, you can have a guess. Go on.
I'm going to guess like nightmares or sleep paralysis.
Well, we'll have to see, won't we? Before we get to that, though, what do you think about this idea of people finding stone tools and wondering whether they are the elf shot and things like that?
I think it's so amazing because that's what we do, isn't it? We create our own stories to explain the world around us. We create narratives that allow us to understand things that don't make any sense to us. And things like people, seemingly, I'd imagine, fit, healthy people suddenly being hit with pain or a stroke or whatever. You don't understand the workings of the body. So obviously you're going to be like, but it's elves. Because that's how you understand the world around you. And then you find these little arrowheads and you think, well, it's definitely elves then, isn't it? Because where else has this shit come from?
Yeah, people were very much, I can't make one of these, so who on earth could?
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of love it. It's one of those things where, you understand how people came to this conclusion. And now you go, elves, how silly. But no, it wasn't silly for those people. It wasn't silly at all.
It's only with the benefit of hindsight and thousands of years of people making discoveries and writing things down and sharing them that any of this seems at all illogical to us. But actually, if you break it down, if you let go of your modern perspectives for even a moment, it all makes complete sense. And the moment you can do that, it's quite liberating when you discuss these things. Because in a sense, there can be a temptation to say, well, people must have been so stupid back then. And there's a difference between stupidity and education and discovery, isn't there? Such a huge difference. If these people were stupid, they would have died. It's as simple as that, really. But what they didn't have is they didn't have our same perspectives. And I think one of the things I really like about it, I think there can be a temptation today to be incredibly binary over things, to say, well, this is the realm of religion and this is the realm of science. And I know that there'll be people listening to this today who believe firmly in science and discovery and a very profound religious faith. And that is something that is completely natural to them, and quite rightly so. And there'll be other people who say, well, no, I'm an atheist and I could never get on board with that sort of things, but I do believe in the realm of science. But science and religion and nature were just one and the same thing to these people. It was, you think about the word science, it just means sort of knowledge and consciousness, doesn't it? And this is how they were interpreting with all of their senses the world around them, what they saw, what they felt, and in this case, especially with invisible wounds, what they were feeling personally and communicating that to another person who could try and help them. So shall we get into our next charm?
Yes, please.
Now, by way of upping the difficulty, this charm is likely to be even older than the one before. So although it's from the same source, it's likely to come from an even older time. And so the chances of me doing this one in one take, I think, really are remote. But we'll give it a try, shall we? With Dweoch against a dwarf. With Dweoch, man shall niemand surfen little of latten swilcha man mit ofrath on ritan das namon on alcha oflaten. Maximanius, Malchus, Johannes, Martinanius, Dionysius, Constantinus, Seraphion. Then, after that Yeldor, that man, hereafter quetheth, man shall singen. Erst on that winstra air, then on that swithra ear, then buffan, das mannes moldan. Und ja, thena an medenman, to ond ho hit on his swearon, on do man swa 3 days. Him bith sonnesel. Here kom en gangen in spidden wit. Hafter him his hammon on hande. Queth that thou his hangst were. Leda there his tear on swearon. Ungunnan him on than landa lithan. Sonna swa he on them landa kommen tha ungunnan. Him tha leomu kolian. Tha kom ungangen deora sweesta. Tha jeanda dura hea ond atha swor. That nefra this tham edlean. Edlean near musta. Near tham the this yeldon begitten meter. Oda tha this yaldo on galan kutha. Amen fiat. All right. Any parts of that? Because I think that one's quite a lot more tricky.
I was really struggling there. Yeah, sorry, I could not, because the last one I felt like I could get the gist of sentences because I could get the feel of certain words, but this one was much more difficult.
It's really, really tricky. Now, the thing about this one in terms of the structure is the first bit is an instruction. The second bit is meant to be a charm that is sung. So essentially it's saying, right, so this is the idea with this. This is what you need to prepare for this charm. Once you've done that, you do this for 3 days, and then every day you sing this bit. And so essentially this is a much more supernatural charm than the last one, which had more elements of, at least in theory, practical medicine about it. And also it seems to have come from a translation of a much earlier form of language. This was probably the equivalent of us reading Shakespeare today for a person who was living in sort of the 10th century.
Okay, so it makes sense that it would be more difficult to get your head around.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably no coincidence as well, aside from the fact that I'm just getting a bit knackered now, that I had to stop twice in that and have another go, didn't I?
Yeah.
Certainly not helped by the fact that the translation which we've got here, there are abbreviations and missing bits within the text which we've had to sort of infer what they might be. So it is a lot more difficult. But I'm just going to read a couple of bits to you and see if you've got any idea with this. Here come.
Go again?
Any ideas? Here come.
Here come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here come.
Yeah.
In gangen, in speeden wit.
In something and speed of wit in... What was it? Gangen? No, go on then.
In
tell
gangen,
me what it is.
yes. Well, I'll tell you what. With that bit there, the speeden bit, if I just tell you that means spider.
Oh.
Or rather grammatically, in the form of a spider.
Okay.
Should we hear the translation and see if it makes any more sense at all?
Yes, please.
I'll be honest with you, even in modern English, well, this one is pretty mad. So, buckle up. Against a dwarf. Against a dwarf, one must take 7 small wafers, such as are used for communion offerings, and write these names on each wafer: Maximianus, Malchus, Johannes, Martinianus, Dionysius, Constantinus, Seraphion. Then, next, the spell that is quoted hereafter is to be sung, first in the left ear, then in the right ear, then above the man's head. And then let a maiden approach and hang it on his neck, and let this be done in this way for 3 days. It will go better with him soon. Here came to enter a within spider creature. He had his harness in his hand, said that you were his steed, laid his reins upon your neck. They began then to depart from this land. As soon as they had come from the land, then his limbs began to cool. Then there came to enter the sister of the dwarf. Then she made an end of it, and swore oaths that never should this thing afflict the patient, or the one who is able to obtain this spell, or who knows how to chant this spell. Amen. Let it be.
I mean, amen to that, sister. I still don't really understand. So we've got, right, I got the bit that you get communion wafers and you write down the names of all those people. It was like, a list of people. You do that for a couple of days or whatever, and then
3 days, yeah. Come on, get it right. Don't know, a couple of days. You wouldn't take a course of medicine for less than what you were prescribed, would you? So
no, sorry, 3 days. I really need to get this right clearly. And then the dwarf will come along and use you as like a steed. Is that what it said?
Yes, that's right. So put his reins on you and ride you around, basically.
And ride you around, and you'll feel it around your neck or your throat. And then
your limbs begin to cool.
And then she comes along and puts an end to it.
Yes, the sister of the dwarf puts an end to it.
The sister of the dwarf.
She's the sister of the dwarf, yeah. Well, we will go through with the explanations of this, but essentially the sister's coming along to say to the dwarf, "Oh, come on, not you again. Stop it. I've told you not to do this. Come on with me. Come on, let's go home."
I mean,
so she basically bosses around the dwarf.
Contrary to popular belief, there are indeed dwarf women.
And there are indeed, yes.
Okay, that is right. Okay, I still don't fully. Yeah, no, I don't know. I feel like my assertion is not too far off.
No, do you know what? You are pretty well bang on. The thing is with this is there's a lot of context to this, which would have been completely obvious to anyone at the time. But unless you really are into your more niche Bible stories, it just won't make any sense. So, for example, this idea of 7 wafers and those 7 names has got a special significance. And the idea that you lose control of your own body and your own mind as a result of the dwarf is really crucial to understanding what may be going on here. So, shall we get into the explanations?
Yeah, I also would like to tell you that the only reason I knew that it was sleep paralysis was because you said the phrase, I have experienced this and many of your listeners have. And I was like, oh, well, sleep paralysis, that's what it is.
Bit of a giveaway. I should have teased you a bit more, shouldn't I?
Yeah, you should have. You need to be very careful about what you say around me, because I will pick up on some of it sometimes.
You're not going to miss a trick, are you? Well, what we will get into now is we'll look at what the meanings are behind this, because it has been the subject of long interpretation, but this is pretty well what's agreed to be the meaning behind it. So let's get into it. So if you are none the wiser, then actually fair enough. The meaning of this charm is in part obscured by the refusal of the healer to name the entity that it is intended to deal with. It speaks of the illness-giving dwarf euphemistically as an inspiden wicht, a dwarf shape-shifting as a spider. Now imagine how common it might have been to find spiders in the cobweb-strewn corners of an early medieval house, and how, much as today, their busy scurrying might have frightened the arachnophobic. Here, though, the spider creature attaches reins to its victim and, controlling them, departs from the land. The implication here is that the sufferer is being taken to a different place or a different dimension. As this cure is to be spoken into the left and right ears of the dwarf's victim, it seems perhaps that this is a case of the theft of the soul, or perhaps the transportation of the victim's consciousness, taken perhaps to the land of dreams, or perhaps to the land of nightmares. Consider that word for a moment. Nightmare. Nightmare. Much as a mare or horse might be controlled, here the dwarf is taking its victim to a place of terrible dreams and visions. The nightmare in Germanic folklore is a harmful being who walks on the legs and chests of the sleeping, bringing on frightful visions in one's sleep. The victim is said here to be being ridden and controlled by the nightmare dwarf to his evil ends. Why the assumption that the victim is asleep? Well, the connection would likely have been obvious at the time, as it may be to some of you. Here, the supernatural or pagan ideas meld with the Christian. Communion wafers, worn like a pagan charm around the neck, placed by a pure virgin soul and marked with the names of the legendary 7 sleepers of Ephesus. The Christian telling of the story says that Maximian, Malchus, John, Constantine, and Dionysius, Martinian, and Seraphion were Christians living under the rule of the Roman Emperor Decius in the 3rd century. They were persecuted for their beliefs, and on refusing to recant, they gave away all their belongings to the poor and went to live as hermits in a cave. Here, the tale goes, they fell asleep. Decius ordered the cave to be blocked up, entombing them. Years later, Christianity was adopted as the official religion of the Roman Empire. The cave was opened up and the 7 sleepers were still within, miraculously sleeping. They awoke and stepped into a new Christianized world, much to their joy and astonishment. Here in this charm, the 7 sleepers' names are to be inscribed on the communion wafers. Later, medieval charms invoke the names of the 7 sleepers to secure peaceful and restful sleep. And the same may be reasonably supposed to apply here. The charm, with dweoch, is hoping to rid the sufferer of nightmares, but perhaps something more. The charm makes vivid reference to the idea of the victim being somehow controlled by the dwarf, being harnessed until the limbs cool and the effects wear off. These references could well suggest that Against the Dwarf is intended not only to prevent nightmares, but even sleep paralysis. The idea that one might be the subject to a waking nightmare, complete with hallucinations and evil figures, is one that persists through the Middle Ages and into the present day, with the idea of a sleep paralysis demon being seen during episodes of sleep paralysis might, in the culture of the early medieval period, be interpreted as a dwarf or nightmare that needs to be banished. Speaking from unfortunate experience, I can describe to you the most terrifying instances of sleep paralysis that I have had. This may have been interest in and of itself, but I'll try to relate it to how such experiences might be interpreted in the early medieval mind. I still experience sleep paralysis, thankfully infrequently. I do not wish to undermine anyone's genuine belief in such experiences being paranormal, but in my own personal case, I have thankfully become more skilled in recognising sleep paralysis and overcoming the symptoms through my own actions. At first, however, when I did not recognise the signs, it was deeply troubling, even terrifying as an experience. My first memory of sleep paralysis was from when I was in my mid-20s. For me, episodes of sleep paralysis tend to coincide with times of stress or poor mental well-being. If I have an incident of sleep paralysis, I don't ignore it, treating it like a mental check engine light blinking on my metaphorical dashboard, requiring some attention. At the time of my first and by far the worst episode of sleep paralysis, I was not yet earning enough as a teacher to escape the miserable and uncomfortable house that was all I could afford in Canterbury. The rent was high, the conditions cold and damp, and the house terribly cramped. I hadn't realised it at the time, but I'd become too ashamed of the place to welcome friends around anymore for evening do's, or it could be depressing just to be there in the truest sense. It was also experiencing that dip in confidence which comes with an increased experience at work, and teaching was an unforgiving business, exacerbated by my lack of coping strategies to deal with it. My bedroom was small, like the rest of the house, and the bed almost spanned the width of the room. Late at night, I awoke and I found that I was lying on my back, utterly unable to move, but fully aware and awake. This was troubling enough, but soon a towering black hooded figure materialised at the right-hand side of my bed. He must have been 7 feet tall or more, and I could not see any features within the gaping hole of the cowl drawn over his head. He then slowly and very deliberately moved to the foot of the bed in an anti-clockwise motion, yawning void of the cowl never moving from me. He slowly passed up the left-hand side, and then, impossibly, behind me, my head. The bed was placed hard up against the wall, and yet still the figure circled. He did not disappear into the wall and then re-emerge. It was more that the wall itself seemed to glitch and both be there and not be there at the same time. The figure circled my bed perhaps 5 times, until I finally found myself breathing shallow, terrified breaths, and the sensation began to return to my toes. Then my feet, and then quite rapidly the paralysis was broken. I leaned over and switched on the light. I knew that there was nobody there, but I had to check. I got up, switched on every light in this small house and checked every room. I had a glass of water, returned to bed, and eventually drifted off to sleep. I was thankful for my sceptical mind. There was every reason for me to genuinely think I had seen a ghost. After all, black-robed monks of the Dominican order would have been frequent visitors to Canterbury. Moreover, my Victorian house was built atop the moat of the medieval castle. Perhaps most persuasively, the small green park opposite my house was in fact a disused cemetery, the stones of its permanent residents relocated against the walls, with evidence of reused medieval stone within the brickwork. Even the pub down the road, the White Hart, was famous for the coolness of its ales, the cellar being the former mortuary chapel of the long-demolished St Mary in Castro Church. All this might play on the mind, but I chose, and I still choose, to explain my visions as the hallucinations of a briefly troubled mind. This was just as well. Perhaps 1 week later, it happened again. This time, though, I was lying on my back, but with my face turned to the old white door. The door did not fit the frame well, and the old timbers warped somewhat, which let in shafts of orange streetlight as they crept under and over the door. On this occasion, there was no robed figure. Instead, very gradually, a shadow began to emerge in the streetlight. It was slender, but with distinct hairs sticking out of it. It was unmistakably a spider's leg, but of a spider of quite impossible proportions. First one leg emerged into the shadow, and then another, and then a third, as they twitched and felt their way up the door. I only saw these legs before the paralysis released me from its grasp and I was able to get up. Again confirmed that there were no monstrous arachnids casting their shadow on the streetlights, and again I returned to bed. Perhaps these alarming experiences were a blessing in disguise. I decided I needed to speak to family about how the job was making me feel and how the house was not helping, and within a few months I had been able to move to a much better place, both in the sense of my accommodation and in my sense of mind. These days, I rarely see figures or shadows during sleep paralysis, and if I do, they are fleeting. I can now recognise the experience for what it is. I consciously breathe slowly in and then out, and within seconds I can begin to murmur and then speak and then move once more. However, I have the benefit of information at my fingertips, a naturally sceptical and sometimes cynical mind, and the knowledge that I'm not alone in these experiences. In the small, often dispersed communities of early medieval England, this was not the case. Imagine the horror of seeing figures, spiders, and demons whilst unable to move. With no other explanation, a supernatural cause would doubtless be identified, and within this, the help of the Christian God would be beseeched, alongside some deep-rooted pagan ideas too. Indeed, the sung charm makes reference not to God aiding the sufferer, but an enigmatic Deodas Suesta, the sister of the dwarf. It is claimed that it is she who will put an end to the torment, commanding her evil brother to desist. In this, we can see that in the early medieval mind, there are benign, even benevolent supernatural forces alongside the malign. One might imagine a powerful she-dweller, frustrated and angered by her wayward brother's misdeeds against these mortals. How far is against the dwarf a Christian prayer? How far is it a pagan ritual behaviour? Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between, but I rather favour the latter, and it seems that whatever monastic scribe recorded the charm was not too troubled by its heathen content. We cannot be sure what Against the Dwarf is really about, and we cannot be sure that it really was a charm to ward off sleep paralysis and the visions that it can bring. But to me at least, it seems a very comfortable fit, and I think I can sleep soundly on that knowledge. How do you like that as an explanation?
I actually think I'm just really clever. I'm so glad that it was sleep paralysis. I can't tell you how chuffed I am.
Are you going to edit out the bit where you admitted it was just because I'd mentioned that lots of people said it before?
No. That also makes me sound really perceptive and really clever, so we're going to keep that in.
It does, to be fair. Yeah. So what do you think? Because I think that this idea that you see things, as I have done, and especially how it kind of plays on that fears and the idea that there are spiders skittering around in the shadows and they might be a little bit more than they seem if you're a bit suspicious of them. I just think that as a human experience, that just works so well for me.
Oh, absolutely. And I just think, we see it right up until post-Shakespearean times, where this idea that, when you were asleep and you were sleepwalking, or if you were having nightmares or whatever, it was symptomatic of like you not being well within yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I think, in previous times, if you're asleep and somebody in your midst is having fucking night terrors, have you ever been around somebody when they have night terrors? It's absolutely terrifying to watch.
It's really, really frightening. Yeah.
And I've never mind be the person having the night terror itself, but if you were watching somebody with night terrors, how are you explaining that? You know what I mean? You're going, well, it's there must be something external that is causing this, because they're fine in their day-to-day life, right? They're just mooching around doing whatever it is that these people were doing. And then all of a sudden they're flailing around screaming at nighttime and you can't wake them up, or they're waking up and they're saying, I woke up and I was frozen and there was a monster, there was a dwarf, and we talk about on a really kind of basic level, a lot of what people see when they have sleep paralysis is the hag, which sits on your chest, a little creature that sits on your chest. There's that really famous painting that is said to depict sleep paralysis, which is like a little goblin-y type creature sitting on the sleeper's chest. So obviously people have been seeing this since, the dawn of time, really, or having these experiences. And it makes sense that they'd be like, it's some sort of evil dwarf, because that's the language that they know. This idea that
we should be reminded that dwarf here does not mean dwarf in the sense that we would understand it today. It just means a supernatural being living almost parallel to the real world.
Yes. Yeah. So when I say that's the language that they know, I mean, like, that's the language of explanation that they know. Absolutely. And so it makes absolute sense. It's the same as, fairies being responsible for illnesses, and fairies being responsible for changelings and people who are considered neurodivergent or having disabilities, or all those kind of things. It's, you use the language and the framework that to explain the world around you, particularly when it's frightening.
I think the same goes as well for cures in a more practical sense of saying, well, how did people approach what today we would call therapy?
Yes.
how often would you actually speak to your priest and say, I'm being tormented by this and it's really worrying me? And it's, well, what else is going on in your life? And
Yeah.
I'm sure those conversations happened, and they wouldn't have called it therapy in the same way that we do, and they wouldn't necessarily frame it in the same way. They didn't have the understanding of the neuroscience behind it. I wonder how often it simply was come on, what is troubling you? There must be something on your mind. Are you guilty about something? Are you worried for someone? And they go, well, actually, now you mention it, yes, this is going on, and well, let me say some prayers for you, or let me say this charm for you, and we'll get you sorted out. One of the lines I really like from it, I'm just going to scroll back on my script to find it. On then and Maidenman to ond ho hit on swearon, ond o man swarthraders, him bith sona sel, which translates, I think, quite reassuringly if we kind of ignore the stuff about the maidens with it. It says, and let this be done in this way for 3 days. It will go better with him soon. Is that sense of, look, you're going to get through this. This is going to be about helping you. And I imagine it would have been actually quite a reassuring presence if you were with someone who you really trusted, if they were placing their hands on your head and whispering something to you in your left ear and in your right ear and on top of your head in a caring way.
Yeah.
Saying, look, we're going to do this because it will go better with you soon. And you'll think, yeah, it will do. I've just got to go through this. I will sleep better. I'll feel better. I'll speak to people. But again, it's that mix of the supernatural framing of whatever is going on with the practicality of human connection and saying, yes, but it will get better and we'll make sure of it. Just like in the first poem, it said, I will help you with this.
Which is a really lovely, positive way to round out the episode, I think, that it will get better.
Good people have always wanted to help as well.
That is very true. Good people have always wanted to help and will help in whatever way they can. That is true.
Surround yourself with them, folks. That's, I think, a nice message to finish on.
Tim, it has been an absolute pleasure, as always, to have you here. Thank you for taking the time out of your crazy, crazy life and your crazy, crazy day to come. And actually, I would say you did fucking well with the Old English today.
I mean, if there's anyone who's actually expert on it, they're probably you would get the red pen out now and start finding all the mistakes I was making. But yeah, you know what?
You know what? If anybody starts writing into me and being like, "Tell Tim he made these mistakes in the Old English," honestly, just put the keyboard down. Don't bother, because I won't pass
unless
the
it's
word
the
on.
venerable Bede himself, and yeah, I don't really want to know.
Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you?
Well, at the moment, they can find me in a collapsed heap of exhaustion, probably. But look, jokes aside, it's been really, really nice to do this. I've just missed doing it because we got into a bit of a patch, didn't we? Where we did something about every 1 or 2 months, didn't we? And it's just not happened recently, and it's not through anyone's kind of mistakes or anything else. It's just how it's worked out. So it is really, really lovely to be back. But you can find me on my YouTube channel, which is Mr. Cloke History. It's been going really well. It's helping out a lot of students, although it's really geared towards the British school curriculum. A lot of my rapid revision videos, you can just put the playlist on and it works almost like a short course or a podcast on a variety of topics. So check out what I've got there. There's a load of particularly British and US history topics on there. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. And you can find me on Dry Wipe History as well, which is my Instagram. Do follow me on there. And it would be great to see you come along. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, Tim. It has been an absolute joy.
Thanks for having me.
This holiday, Verizon is helping you bundle up incredible gifts and savings. You'll get the latest phone with the new line on My Plan and a brand new smartwatch and tablet. No trade-in needed, even on our lowest price plan. That's 2 gifts for your family and 1 for you. Or 2 for you and 1 for someone else. Or 3 gifts for you and only you. Either way, you save big on 3 amazing gifts at Verizon. All on the best 5G network. Visit Verizon today. Rankings based on Root Metric Root Score report dated 1/8/2025. Your results may vary. Service plan required for watch and tablet. Additional terms apply.